Hello, and welcome to the continuation of GGNA's ongoing webinar series. GGNA and DonorScape are pleased to present exciting topics, thought leadership, and best practices featuring our partnerships with institutions that we hope are useful to you as client partners during this global pandemic and beyond. Today, we are featuring a session with NorthShore University HealthSystem and their journey towards using analytics to predict donor and prospect behavior. NorthShore University HealthSystem is an integrated healthcare delivery system serving patients throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. NorthShore has a long history of serving the healthcare needs of its community, pioneering work in medical research, leading edge clinical programs, academic scholarships, and care for the medically underserved. NorthShore desired insight into patient and patient family prospects to systematically evaluate their ability and likelihood to increase their level of support or to make first-time contributions, thereby enhancing NorthShore's prospect pipeline and in building accelerated, sustainable growth in philanthropic support. GGNA has partnered with NorthShore since 2019 to provide, through our affordable DonorScape suite of data products and services, predictive analytics, prospect identification, research, and consulting services. I would like to welcome Nicole Brennan, CFRE and Senior Director of Annual Giving, and Mick Reich, Program Manager of Annual Giving with NorthShore University HealthSystem. Nicole and Mick will have some interactive content in today's session, so please pay attention to those prompts. Please pose any questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. We'll have time at the end of the session to answer some questions live. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Nicole and Mick.
Thank you so much, Paul. We really appreciate the warm welcome. Mick and I are excited to share NorthShore's journey to use predictive modeling with you today. We'll start with a poll in a minute, but let me quickly walk you through our agenda of what we'll cover today. First off, we'll give you an overview of our journey. And yes, it does say it was a 5-year journey. We'll share the key components of our success with you. And if you promise to stick with us, let me give you a little preview of those success points. Teamwork, gaining leadership buy-in, plenty of patience, along with a touch of humor has really been important to the process. After digging into what predictive modeling is, we'll talk about our implementation process and how it ended up happening during the pandemic and how we are leveraging the model to retain our new COVID-19 emergency crisis donors. We'll leave time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to add questions into the Q&A box, as Paul mentioned. Okay, now to the poll. We really want to hear from you. Mick is going to add the link into the chat box. Please click on the link and share one word that describes how you feel about starting a predictive analytics project. This link will link to the website. Go ahead and skip adding your name. This is anonymous. And then once you get to the page with the question, please enter your one word that describes how you feel about starting a predictive analytics project. Please be honest, whatever is the first feeling or thought or descriptive word that pops into your head. Now, if you are having any technical difficulties, try another browser. So last week it worked better on an Internet Explorer. Today it worked better on Chrome, but feel free to go ahead and just play around with it. While you answer the poll, I will go ahead and share background on who we are. So as Paul mentioned, NorthShore University HealthSystem is located in Metro Chicago. We are a 5-hospital system with 140 care sites and serve over 600,000 patients each year. We are a top 15 teaching hospital, even though technically we do not give out diplomas. Teaching is a core part of our mission as we have training programs for residents and for med students. In 2003, NorthShore was among the first in the country to start using system-wide electronic health records. We've leveraged the use of data analytics and predictive models on our clinical side to improve patient outcomes, such as identifying patients who are at higher risk for heart attacks or for strokes. Even though we've never done predictive modeling on the fundraising side before, we definitely have an appetite for the power of data. Our foundation raises $15 to $20 million a year for clinical care, for research, and for education. We're a small shop, but I like to say we're small but mighty. And the foundation, we're on a best-in-class journey. This is essentially our 3 to 5 year strategic plan to raise more money. And then finally, a disclaimer before we move forward. Mick and I are not experts in predictive modeling. We don't have PhDs in analytics or anything like that. And I'm sure there's plenty of people listening on the webinar that are experts more than us. We're here to share our story of how we approach predictive modeling with our team. And we'll definitely rely on Paul from GGNA to keep us honest. So let's go ahead and go to the poll. Mick is going to be bringing up the results of that. And you can see our word cloud of what comes to mind when you think of predictive analytics project. I see excited, overwhelmed, nervous, trepidation, something about mountains perhaps, innovative, terrified. Yeah, that's a lot of range of emotions. But overall, I see a lot of uncertainty, nervousness, and I know for me personally, there was a lot of fear of math in it too. We were scared here at NorthShore about this, but we knew that we needed help, and we knew that we needed additional tools to assist us. So let me walk you through the problem of what we needed help with. So as a health system, our bread and butter is grateful patient fundraising. In fact, 70% of our donors are patients. Philanthropy helps patients and their families to express gratitude for the care that they've received. And honestly, it can be part of the healing process too. In 2013, an updating rule for HIPAA, or the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, was a real game changer for hospital fundraising programs. At that point, fundraising departments were allowed limited patient information into our prospecting work. Overnight, this provided the opportunity for growth as we had access to an overwhelming number of prospects. We also had the ability to more effectively be effective in our messaging as we were able to personalize to a greater extent. Don't get me wrong, it was a great problem to have access to so many prospects, but we did feel like this little girl in the photo of just being blasted with a fire hose of prospects. We needed help to narrow the universe and find the right prospects to target. As we looked into the problem, we talked and we benchmarked with our peers about how they were tackling similar problems. We heard over and over again from larger institutions that they were using predictive modeling. I was aware of predictive modeling when I previously worked at a higher ed institution that used it to help our gift officers to identify prospects for their major gift portfolios. I wasn't involved, but I was intrigued and I wanted to learn more. So knowing what we know now, next slide please, we were able to define predictive modeling as such, as finding the right donors and the grateful patient prospects who are more likely to donate, to upgrade, and make NorthShore their top charity. Using data on past giving history, their strength of the relationship with NorthShore, their capacity to make a gift, and external consumer behavior basically creates our predictive model. All of these data points feed into the model, which in turn helps us to identify the best prospects for annual giving, major gifts, and planned giving. Let's be clear, our goal is to raise more money. Our goal is not to create the perfect predictive model. It is simply a tool for us to use to help us drive towards success. Paul, can you add in a little bit more? Is there anything that you would add to this definition from a technical side?
That's a perfect definition for NorthShore, and a perfect sort of mission for predictive modeling and predictive analytics. Very often among our client institutions do we find the term predictive modeling or predictive analytics sort of misused. And you know, in a nutshell, it's really just using statistics to analyze historical facts and then to really make predictions for the future. In this case, it's donor behavior and prospect behavior. You know, the caveat to any kind of predictive modeling exercise is that our business of fundraising is a reactive one. We need to ask donors to give. And predictive modeling is not something that will do that, but it is, as you mentioned, Nicole, a tool to help you focus resources and to develop a plan or a strategic plan around making the most of those limited resources.
Well, I'm glad to know that our definitions are about the same. Okay, now let's move into our 5-year journey. Now, let me share a little bit more with you. Our journey to predictive modeling hasn't been linear. It's not been a direct path. There's been plenty of starts and stops and some backward movement too. To be honest, all of this is expected with change management, but it required a lot of patience and probably far too many meetings for all of us as well. As I mentioned earlier, we were drowning in data in FY16. In FY17, we were learning and experimenting. We did benchmarking and we started attending webinars like the one here today. We originally thought that we focus on predictive model just for annual giving to reduce the quantities of our direct mail solicitations, but we ended up expanding it to include major giving and planned giving models as well. In FY18, we started talking with vendors, and in FY19, we selected a vendor and went through internal approvals while we did a lot of detailed work to prepare for the model. And then finally this year in FY20, we were able to actually have the predictive model in hand, but then COVID-19 hit, and of course that changed everyone's world, but it had a direct impact on us working directly in healthcare, but we'll get into that shortly. So let me walk you through our key components to success. Creating shared understanding within our team was really key. Particularly creating a cross-functional team was very important. We had representatives from key areas of the foundation who came together to problem solve our fire hose problem and undertake the predictive modeling project. This included Mick and I in annual giving, along with teammates in data and operations, research, gift officers, as well as representation from leadership. Mick was identified as the project leader, but we couldn't have done it without our team, particularly Kirsten Leiby, Karen Cohn, and Gina Leno.
Nicole, I'm going to jump in real quick. This was a team effort, but I want to specifically give a shout out to Gina. She just retired last week. I hope all of our meetings and all we asked of her did not drive her to retire, but I wanted to say that this would not have been possible without her and her help specifically. So thank you, Gina.
We already missed you, Gina. It's day one without you. Thanks, Mick. So Mick made sure as the project leader that we had a detailed project plan with deadlines and clear roles and responsibilities for each of us. We started off with a listening campaign where we explored what each party wanted and, more importantly, why. For example, we learned that gift officers wanted the end result of a clear list of prospects that they could start talking to in order to qualify for major gifts. They didn't want to know the details of how we got there. But conversely, prospect research wanted to make sure the narrowing process was balanced and accurate. And then our data and operations team, who were going to do the heavy lifting of the project, wanted to know, what does this process look like? Is it sustainable with our current workload and our current resources? And from annual fund, I was ready to do it. I wanted to reduce my acquisition budget and be able to better target prospects. For me personally, when we began this project, I didn't fully appreciate how much work was actually involved for us, and particularly for our data and operations team. And then just real quick, finally, creating shared definitions and using common terminology was really important to coming to consensus on what modeling is and what it's not. We eventually came together with shared goals and expectations. And for FY20, we actually put predictive modeling into our department and individual performance goals. Another key component was leadership buy-in. That's important to any change management strategy. And for us, that buy-in process started with acknowledging the value of data and making informed decisions. By showcasing the strength of data as an asset and harnessing it to improve our fundraising was a key turning point. As I mentioned before, benchmarking and sharing possibilities was integral to our success. We kept bringing it up whenever possible with leadership. We even started putting it in a wish list of budget items. We involved leadership in our journey, sharing our challenges and our opportunities and our hurdles. And we acknowledged the budget and the considerable investment in not only dollars, but also staff resources too. With resources in hand, leadership challenged us to be bold and aspirational in this project. And with so many projects, we knew we needed to manage expectations. Predictive modeling is not a silver bullet, and it'll take time to harness the modeling to build our pipeline. So let me next turn it over to Mick, who will walk us through the detailed data work and the implementation process.
Thanks, Nicole. Our appetite and excitement for predictive modeling was not the start of our love affair with data. A/B testing has always been the guiding force for annual funds, and over the past few years, we have tested everything from outer envelopes to ask amounts to target ages and beyond. If we could figure out a way to track it in the database, we probably tested it during one appeal or another, and then use that information to inform our future decisions. It was with that same mentality and resulting lessons that I ended up developing an internal model score to apply for specific lists, just to try and do something and have something in-house. We were grasping at straws a bit, but we needed to identify high-level prospects within our files, and I worked with gift officers to validate the results of that internal piece, and the outcomes were okay, but not great. And the whole process was arduous each and every time we had to run it. We needed to expedite it all. We couldn't do it in-house. But experimenting with internally developed weighted scores helped us better understand the data as well as our needs. A big part of that lesson was understanding that the data we had was rather clean, but other than donations, we didn't have a lot of information surrounding engagement. As a committee, we identified some key areas where we could reasonably expand our measurable indicators of a strong relationship with NorthShore. But even with that consensus, it was a time-consuming project and took a lot of resources from our data ops team to add things like event attendance and communication tracking. And all of that work we did was part of the learning phase. Up until this point, we have defined and refined, we have listened and learned, we have experimented and expanded. But if I were to identify a key point in our process when we moved from a learning phase to an action phase, it would have been when we created our RFP. On your screen, you can see a small sample of the questions we asked and information we provided to interested vendors. Collectively putting on paper our background, our goals, our language, and the lessons we had learned up until that point allowed us as a team to have shared expectations with one another and with vendors. We could be more direct with vendors and move beyond all the bells and whistles involved in sales pitches to efficiently reach the substance of each option we were weighing. This approach also allowed us to divide and conquer, talking to various vendors while still ensuring everyone was asking the same questions. Because we are asking the same questions, we had a strong baseline to compare what ended up being very different options. This is an actual snippet from our findings document. You can see we tracked different indicators that would help us make responsible decisions. We looked at outcomes, what kind of model we would receive, how expansive. Was it tailored to us and our data and our donors, or was it a one-size-fits-all? We looked at the staff time needed. We looked at the estimated time period between a signed contract and having the data, obviously always taking that with a substantial grain of salt. We obviously looked at cost, but even with that, we had to compare one-time costs versus subscription-based contracts. And we also had to weigh in if we needed outside resources, including new software or extra training for our team, or even extra resources from our own IT department. All of this allowed for a lot of in-depth conversations, and it helped us put things in a shared place, even if several of us were having different conversations with different vendors. Spoiler alert, we chose GGNA. I know you are all shocked by that revelation. But even our relationship with GGNA did not happen overnight. This relationship goes back to November of 2018, where Paul and I met at a conference where I was scoping out predictive model and vendors. We continued our conversation via email, and that led to an informal conversation. Paul and Jeff from GGNA and our VP Elizabeth and I met for coffee. It was Valentine's Day 2019. I won't say that it was love at first sight, but there certainly was chemistry. We used that as a meeting to discuss some of our needs and concerns, and we did end up sending our RFP to them. And that Valentine's Day data date went so well, we invited GGNA back to speak to the entire committee in April of that same year. After conferring as a committee, it became clear for us that GGNA was going to be our choice, and we immediately started working on the back end issues of contracts and database prep. But the largest hurdle, as you may anticipate and appreciate, was compliance. Our organization takes its constituents' privacy very seriously and has very specific requirements for data security. There was a lot of thoughtful discussion and review required to gain approval to proceed. And even though it took some time to work through everything, I really appreciate how much NorthShore values data security and compliance, and how much GGNA was willing to work with us through that process. And I really do think we got a better process as a result. We were able to meet with the standards for compliance, and we were officially approved to proceed in August of 2019. But looking at our workloads, the committee decided implementation was not prudent between September and December. We had fiscal year end, annual report, calendar year end, as well as several special projects. So we made an intentional decision to delay until the start of the new calendar year. So we're finally in 2020. In January 2020, we identified our fields for export and started the process of transferring data to GGNA for analysis. And then we waited. We waited, but we did not sit back and sip margaritas while Paul and the team worked their magic. And by magic, I mean math. In the 10 weeks between sending the data and receiving the results, we met several times as different teams, and a few times with Paul to discuss how we plan to use the data once we had it, and where to put it in our database once it all came back to us. Again, our data team completely rocked it. They were integral in helping everyone find a way to balance clean data with having information that could easily be accessed.
Mick, I remember one of those meetings. It was March 11th, 2020, and honestly, I will never forget that meeting.
Yeah, that was a particular interesting point. After years of hard work, the exact point our project was finally coming together, the world started falling apart, and I'll be honest, so did my body. I am such a nerd. I was actually excited to have a final meeting with Paul before our findings were going to be revealed. And though I wasn't feeling well, I dragged myself out of bed because of that excitement to go into the office. This was early in the pandemic, and ironically, we didn't have much data on the virus. And because what I was experiencing didn't line up at all with COVID symptoms being reported, I thought I had a sinus infection. Well, I did not have a sinus infection. Within a few days, I tested positive for COVID-19, and the whole office had to shut down. March 11th became the exposure date for so many of my coworkers, and a date they all had to repeat each time they filled out a form or they got tested. I am now a very grateful patient of NorthShore myself. They were who I entrusted with my care during this time. I'm also incredibly grateful that I didn't infect anybody else and cause a domino effect of other infections. But throughout all of that, throughout my illness and throughout all the ups and downs, we continued working throughout it all. The fact that that work continued speaks to the dedication and flexibility of our entire team. That is part of my story with predictive modeling and COVID. I'm actually interested to hear from some of you. We're going to put up a poll now, and I'd love to learn more about how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting your view of predictive modeling. So as you answer that, our story will continue. On March 31st, so a couple of weeks after my positive test, Paul presented findings to our entire team, all of whom were working from home and some of whom were still quarantining. I had been in isolation for weeks by this point, so I can tell you I was legit excited for this meeting, if only to have something else on which to focus. And at this point, I'll say that the worst thing that could have happened to this project would have been if after all this hard work, we didn't actually use the ratings provided. In a strange way, COVID-19 became an opportunity to ensure that wouldn't happen. We became a place for crisis donations overnight. Our priorities were constantly shifting as we learned more and adapted. We were working from home alongside kids and spouses and pets, and we were dealing with an unprecedented volume. We had a 54% increase of new donors at this point, and we were processing gifts at a rate 4 times higher than the same time period the year before. If we were under 1 fire hose when this whole journey started, we were now under 10. I don't think all the ratings were actually imported into our database before I started pulling them out and applying them to segments and thank you call lists and different outreaches as a way to bring at least some control to the flow of our donor information. We were feeling overwhelmed, and I'm interested to hear if you were feeling the same. So let's look at those results of that poll and see if that's how you were feeling too. Well, apparently a lot of you are feeling the same about predictive modeling after COVID, but many of you still seem interested, even more interested than before. I can tell you that our COVID experience was really important to us, and we needed to be flexible throughout the whole thing.
I like that a couple people still don't know what predictive modeling is, so we'll dig into that a little bit more in the next couple slides.
Yep, we're working on it. So at this point, we're in the middle of the pandemic. We have the data. It's finally in our hands, but this is a key moment in any project. There is a serious opportunity for analysis paralysis. We now have multiple models. You can see them on your screen, and each one of those have different definitions and different requirements, and no one score or one model was going to get us where any of us needed to go. Honestly, we avoided the paralysis by jumping right in. Even before the results were in, I started really digging into resources and began crafting reference sheets for myself and for others, and became a super user. I held short, digestible trainings, giving a high-level overview of what each rating meant and how it could be used. These weren't more than 15 minutes and were part of our team huddles that we were already having daily. And for those who were interested, I was, and still am, available for one-on-ones when somebody wants to go deeper. Because individuals had a better understanding of the ratings when we incorporated them in appeals list or thank you call list or other pieces, team members trusted the ratings more and have been much more likely to use them rather than be scared off by them or overwhelmed by them. There's still work to be done, still data to understand, analysis to complete, conversations to be had. But just a few short months after receiving the data, we are actively applying it to multiple business practices. We are already seeing a shift in culture as a result. We didn't need to be perfect to get it right. And I didn't need to take multivariable calculus or learn a new computer language to understand how to use the information that would help our team. But it doesn't matter how much we understand the ratings if we aren't actually able to accomplish our ultimate goal of partnering with more donors and raising more money. Nicole has the inside scoop on how that is starting to unfold.
Thanks, Mick. So we have the ratings. After I did my happy dance, the fun really began for me. So for the annual Giving World, we received a rating for each prospect that provided a recommendation on what their total cumulative giving should be each year to our institution. And this was really a dream come true for me. This allows us to identify key prospects for upgrade. So for example, for prospects that were rated to be giving over $5,000 each year, 27% of our donors are giving below that range. And then for donors who are rated between the $2,500 and the $5,000 category, we have 39% of our donors who are giving below capacity. This is super exciting because this shows opportunity and where we can specifically target those folks for upgrades in our mid-level giving program. Predictive modeling is even more important in this tight budget environment to reduce our acquisition quantities. This allows us to narrow down our large universe of hundreds of thousands of non-donor prospects into a manageable mailing segment of 10 or 20,000 prospects. We are testing all of this for our appeals this summer and fall, and we're excited to see our initial results. We're actually setting up a meeting with Paul this week to review them. To be honest, we are still learning about how to apply this and how is this going to apply to our overall fundraising results. I'm going to hand it over to Paul really quickly to answer the question of what can clients expect to see with their fundraising results after incorporating predictive modeling?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I'd love to say that by applying or using ratings from an external or third party will instantly create lift and instantly improve total private support or fundraising results. And that's not exactly the reality, at least initially, right? It takes a lot of incorporating these ratings into your workflow and better understanding how they're used and what the interactions are between these ratings, your appeals and messaging and communications, as well as your overall strategy. Certainly COVID has potentially impacted some of the predictive models that others have. And certainly our own ratings and predictive modeling process with NorthShore may and are likely to have been affected. You know, the sort of key outcome to this, in my view, is how we're continuing to segment, prioritize, and really take another look at all of our prospects through a lens of, are we using our resources to their maximum? Whether it be our frontline fundraisers, both on the major and gift planning side, are we taking a look at their portfolios and making some decisions about the composition of those portfolios? And certainly on the annual giving side with Nicole and Mick, are we taking a look at our response rates, and can those be improved by segmenting our prospects in this way?
Thanks, Paul. I mean, I definitely suggest everyone, when they're talking to vendors, talk about the ROI, and not that they're going to be making any promises, but that you have an idea of your expectations and that timeline of what it could be, and on continued consulting support as well. Moving on from annual fund, let me dig into how we have applied this to our mid-level and major gift program. So this is really important as we build our pipeline, and I think it's going to be integral to our fundraising success in the next 3 to 5 years. This model which is really exciting, not only shows us who has the capacity, but also who can make a major gift with also an inclination. So it's capacity plus propensity to try to find the right special sauce. From the major gift side, which for us at NorthShore includes gifts of over $20,000, it is really helping us to immediately rebalance our portfolios. GG&A helped us to identify 250 prospects who are not likely to give major gifts who were in portfolios. So we removed those after careful review. And GG&A also identified 200 top prospects into our major gift portfolios for us to be qualifying. Our major gifts team has reviewed those prospects one by one and has discussed potential strategies to qualify them. And for our mid-level program, this allows us to identify prospects who give in the $1,000 to $20,000 range. In our best-in-class journey, we see a lot of opportunity in this area. This will help us build loyalty with these mid-range donors, along with identifying donors who can make more significant gifts in the future. In December 2019, we hired a new mid-level giving officer, and we knew that these modeling scores were coming and would be a key area to help build our mid-range portfolio. GG&A identified 2,500 prospects who were high priority and unassigned to a portfolio. And you got it, these are now assigned to our new mid-level giving officer. Now you ask, 2,500 people is a lot of prospects for one person. And honestly, it takes a lot of multitasking for sure. But we are considering this more of a warming tray versus a traditional portfolio. So these 2,500 folks are receiving monthly cultivation check-ins and news updates via merged Outlook emails, so it looks like it's individually coming from the gift officer. We're also elevating our outreach and mass communication. And basically, we're treating them like a major gift donor, but only in mass. Once these folks raise their hand, maybe they attend a virtual event, they respond to one of our monthly emails, or they make a donation, even if it's $100, they can then be qualified for a major gift. We're just starting this process, but we're excited to know that we have the right prospects and are applying this to our special cultivation. And then finally, for planned giving for our long-range gifts, we have a strong existing planned giving program, and we were already using best practices to identify age and long donor history to target prospects. But now with GG&A, they've done the hard work for us. And honestly, we are already helping us to expand our pool of prospects. GG&A identified 5,800 top prospects. These folks have an average age of 76 years, 18 years of giving to our institution, and more than half of them have given in the past 3 years to NorthShore. Now, with relying on this predictive model, we are beginning to market planned giving to younger audiences, which will help to build awareness and grow our pipeline in years to come. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Mick to talk about a rating that really scared us initially, and we honestly didn't expect to use it. But in these unusual times of COVID, we pivoted and found a way to use Prizm ratings to communicate with our many new COVID donors.
Yes, while we were just starting to use some of the other models as part of our appeals and our planning, one piece of information that we've been able to dig into right away were the Prizm scores. Prizm looks at demographics and consumer behavior on a national scale and splits people into 68 different groups based on that information. We were initially overwhelmed by this particular rating. It was so much. But as we dug in, and sometimes we actually use ourselves as examples, we realized that this was some really next level stuff and very exciting. Our director of communication is especially excited to start using this. Previously in our targeting or analysis, we may have wielded a hatchet and just looked at broad age groups. But Prizm scores really empowered us to transition from that hatchet to using a scalpel as we sliced and diced our data. When we were given our results, GGNA noted 3 groups who were known to be more philanthropic and give at higher rates, and encouraged us to prioritize donors in those groups. We started doing that, and we're already seeing results from following that advice. But in the time of COVID, we used Prizm data and saw key shifts that let us know we want to expand our focus from those original 3 to include these 3 groups that you see on your screen. I won't go into too much detail, but these groups tend to be younger, still affluent and well educated. And in the case of Big Fish, Small Pond, they're highly involved in their local community, and we are all about local community. These 3 new groups represent an opportunity for growth. Investing in specific types of younger donors in the future, when previously annual funds or planned giving may have limited our focus to only those over 60, is exciting. The fact that we're even looking at these 3 additional groups is a giant sign encouraging us to lean even further into our digital communications. So this is all great, but the answer is what's next? We are leveraging this predictive model even more to focus on our current donor base and expand efforts to younger, urban, and tech-savvy donors. Our planned giving officer and manager of research are working through the substantial list of planned giving prospects and reaching out to them. Mid-level is working through our plan of that warming tray and focusing on those key prospects we were given. This year, we had to turn into a hub for crisis donations. Now our focus will be renewing as many of those people as possible, and that will look very differently than renewing our more traditional donors. These models and scores are helping us strategize for the future. We will continue to test. It's what we do. Well, everything from the Prizm segments to messaging, age, everything we can. And we will continue to learn and train and adapt through all of that. But our quest for data isn't over now that we have our models. In addition to implementing these scores, we are exploring the possibility of partnering with GGNA's Survey Lab. We have done donor surveys in the past, but they have all been anonymous or semi-anonymous. Survey Lab will allow us to reach out to donors about their interests and their experience. And as this is a non-anonymous survey, if a donor expresses interest in a particular area or discloses something like they plan to include NorthShore in their estate planning, we will be able to reach out directly and follow up. It's not a done deal, but we are excited on how Survey Lab could help deepen our donor relationships even further. So now you know our story. I admit we covered a lot, but it was 5 years worth of information. If I were to give advice to our younger selves and sum it all up, I would tell us to listen closely, internally listening to the concerns, needs, and different understanding of the whole team, and listening externally, completing strong and thorough benchmarking with other orgs. Create a shared vision is key, identifying the need together and taking the time to state visions and goals together. I'd encourage us to keep looking ahead, have an idea of how the data will be used, and use that as a North Star in making decisions. I'd underline the importance of teamwork and the need to rely on good partners, because this will not happen if only one team is invested. This means acknowledging what strengths are around the table and what concerns each player brings with them. This includes leadership. Their buy-in means they will be champions for the cause, and that will be key in motivation as well as resources. I say don't be afraid to be aspirational. Put it in your budget, put it in your plans. Don't be scared to reach. With that, of course, is be patient. This will take a long time, but change usually does. And I'd say commit to training. Pick a super user who can spend the time learning this in depth and then train others. The more comfortable individuals feel with the ratings, the more likely the entire culture will shift and the new information will be used. I hope our story has provided you with at least a few takeaways. If nothing else, I hope you are encouraged to take action. Don't be intimidated or frozen by things you don't know with this or other initiatives. If you are beginning of a new project or you are finishing up and about to get your own ratings and models, know that it doesn't have to be perfect to be helpful. And I promise you that you don't need a PhD in analytics to instigate this change and bring it to your own organization. With that, we're going to say thank you for spending the time with us and open it up for some questions.
Nicole and Mick, I'm so very proud to be a part of your journey towards predictive modeling and predictive analytics. Thank you for selecting us as your partner. We do have several questions in the question and answer section. If you don't mind, I'll just read off a few of these and we can figure out how to answer them. The first question seems fairly easy. It's what CRM does NorthShore Health use? I'm sure many of our attendees are interested in that.
We use Blackbaud Razor's Edge. And so you can use it with really any CRM project, but you just have to find a place of where to put the ratings of what works best for querying and exporting. Paul, I'm sure you can talk about a multitude of other CRMs that other clients use.
Yeah, I think in general, there shouldn't be, the CRM should not be a hindrance. I know there are a few that are difficult to work with in terms of exporting data and presenting that towards a data analysis or a predictive model, but we did not have any issue working with Razor's Edge with NorthShore. Nicole, Mick, did you guys have any views on whether or not Razor's Edge was particularly problematic for this exercise?
In general, things worked well. We use Informatics, so that was a key part of our team and implementing this. But again, this would have been something that any CRM probably could have done. So this just happened to be what we were using at the time.
The next question was, NorthShore took 5 years to apply this process. What if there was an immediate need, something sooner, like 5 months? How would you have approached this engagement differently?
Yeah, I think you can do that. I think technically GGNA says it can take, what, 2 months from start to finish? Is what's the official answer, Paul?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, perhaps even sooner, but there were a lot of, I think, sort of circumstances that brought it to this process, and really a learning, you know, situation for us all.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, you could cut out a lot of internal alignment, but that was important to us in our journey so that we could be on the same page. Other institutions and other teammates are farther and perhaps in this journey of what they want. We started out this journey not knowing what predictive modeling was or you know, where to go, and we had to do a lot of learning in this phase. Mick, do you want to jump in at all?
Sure. I'll say if we were to expedite this entire process, the issue of shared understanding is key, but I would assume you'd be starting with that shared understanding because of the accelerated timeline. Organization, however, was key for us, and having things on paper and not taking things or definitions for granted really helped us. Once that was on paper, everything started going a lot faster. So don't skip the initial piece of shared definitions, but maybe just do it with a lot more focus, maybe during a retreat, and then move on from there.
Nicole and Mick, there was another question about buy-in from leadership and colleagues. They want you to talk more about what NorthShore did in terms of techniques to work on change management.
A lot of this was benchmarking, and to honestly say, you know, I talked to such and such institution and look at the fancy new tool that they did, Or let me tell you about this other institution that I talked to, and they were able to grow their fundraising results by X amount. It was a lot of, look at what others are doing, let's do it too. I mean, really kind of almost like middle school alignment. But in reality, we showed them what the problems were and brought them to the table of what we were experiencing and brought them into the journey with us. We also shared with them of what the implications of different choices and options were. So if we chose to do predictive modeling, for example, with this vendor, what would the resources needed and the outcomes and the time frame be? Versus if we chose it with this area, what would the outcome and timeframes be, and what were the trade-offs? And that helped to bring them into the decision process, and I think helped us to create success once we got those ratings to then be across the way on the same page of how important this was. Because the worst thing that could happen is that we put all of these staff time and the budget resources, and then we did nothing with that. We didn't want it to be a stalemate and it not be directly applied right away.
I will say part for me, the biggest thing that I think a lot of people skip when it comes to change management is listening. And this wasn't just like a focus group type listening. We had one-on-one conversations with just about every team member behind closed doors and allowed them to talk about their fears, their needs, all of the things. And then we're able to take that and put it into our vision casting and make sure that people felt heard, and we were taking their concerns and their previous lessons and applying them from the beginning. If people are heard, then they are much more likely to buy into the project, and that included leadership.
Thanks, Michelle. There were a couple of questions, or several actually, that fell into the same category, so I'm going to do my best to try and paraphrase and combine them together. There was a question about the difference between the propensity and likelihood ratings. I'm happy to answer that if you guys prefer. And secondarily, how often do you rescore or reevaluate with changes in underlying data? Do you guys want me to take that? There were a number of ratings that we provided to NorthShore University Health. The two that were asked by the audience were the difference between likelihood and propensity. They're the same in principle in the sense that they are intended to predict response from these donors. In other words, their likelihood to make a gift at their rated levels. However, NorthShore being a healthcare organization, a large bulk of their nearly 500,000 constituent records are patient non-donors who have very little information in the database about their connection to NorthShore outside of being a patient. And since they're non-donors, the lack of any giving history or giving data that hasn't been matched to existing records within Razor's Edge. So the likelihood rating is meant to take advantage of giving information, lifetime giving, number of transactions, how recent, how frequent those gifts were, and of course, any relationship and participation factors that are being tracked within RE. Things like event attendance, volunteer activity, really the list goes on and is varied by what is maintained within Razor's Edge. The propensity rating tries to do the same thing, but without those internal factors that are tracked in Razor's Edge. So going solely on demographic data alone, could we use the profile of major gift donors nationally and apply those scores and that formula or algorithm to the patients within NorthShore's non-donor patient population. And so that's really the difference. I hope that helps. In terms of rescoring and re-identifying changes in that data, we're doing this quarterly with NorthShore. That seemed like an appropriate, kind of frequency that worked well for their workflow and their resources, and how they plan to incorporate them in their various giving programs. Nicole, Michelle, did I answer that okay?
It made sense to me, but if anyone has further questions about the ratings, I know this is where we really rely on Paula and the rest of the team at GGNA to really help us narrow down and understand how to use this and what this all means, because they all seem very similar at first glance.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, and this is a strategic one. They're curious to know about the warming tray for the mid-level donors. What strategies are you using to keep them engaged for that group?
Yeah, so we are, as I mentioned, we're doing the monthly check-ins with Outlook email merges, which has been really helpful for us. So with that, we're individually inviting them to virtual events, which we are starting a virtual event series this fall into the winter. We are also treating them, like I said, as major donors. So if a major donor is getting a mailed impact report, we're going to do kind of a generalized version for our mid-level donors and prospects so that they get something similar. We want them to feel warm and fuzzy so that we're focusing on what the potential of the donor is or the prospect, not just what have you done for us lately. We're trying not to segment based upon, did you give us $1,000? Great, we're only going to treat you in this way. But we're really trying to treat you as what is the potential and what is the potential relationship with us could be. And that's a real mind shift for I think all of us in the fundraising world.
Well, I want to be respectful of time on behalf of GGNA and my colleagues here. I want to thank you guys for participating in this webinar. There will certainly be more content and more data available through our website at www.grunzebachlear.com. Nicole, Michelle, any final thoughts?
No, good luck. You know, we're all in this together. This is a crazy time, and you know, hopefully you're finding tools to make your fundraising shops, you know, more successful. But be well.
I'd say go for it. Don't be scared. I know it's overwhelming and can be a lot to try and work your way through, but be aspirational. Go for it. Try and apply this to your group.